For those of you just joining us, I want to read Matt's bio again. Matthew Sage is an American artist and educator. He works with audio, video, text, and image. His work implores the amorphous spaces between historical, artistic publishing models and democratized digital media environments. He ran Patient Sounds, a record label, for 10 years and released more than 140 art objects from artists around the world in that decade. He now runs cached.media, an intermedia platform producing and distributing intermedia art objects. He lives in Chicago, where he teaches and works in his garden. Obviously, thank you for sending that bio over, and I think it makes pretty clear a small sample of the things that you do, and implies kind of the sense of the larger sample of things that you do that may not fit inside of a bio. One of the things that really jumped out to me from that, and I think is a good starting point, it's a meta starting point, Patient Sounds. And I went over to the website, and this is what we're met with when you go over to the website.
Oh man.
And it's beautiful that the website still exists, and it has this like eulogy. A funny story for me is I used to run a magazine called Third Wave Magazine, and it was a magazine for the float industry, which I used to work in, a sensory deprivation tank industry. So we created the second International Float magazine. The first was made in the 70s by the people who actually invented the commercial float tank. So we were working with them to create a new magazine based off of what they did and bring it into this present moment. And we worked on it for a year. We had three magazines released in that year. And I had some other friends in the float industry who were doing this project, this podcast project, where they made a podcast about different experiences in the float industry every single day. So they did 365 one-hour podcasts.
Whoa.
And they're nuts. They're nuts, right? At the end of that year, they had a live call-in show where you could call in and ask them any question. And it was the last episode of their podcast. The question I called in and asked them was, how do you end things? Like, what are the things that you think about, and what are the things that you have to manage when you come to the end of things? Because we're all obviously so good at beginning new things, and ending things, and ending things properly is something that you're very fortunate to even have the ability to do, that it doesn't just dissolve into obscurity in your life, that you have a moment to say goodbye. And that was like a month before we were announcing the end of our magazine. And so I kind of want to start in this place with you, Matt. And I don't even really know what Patient Sounds was. All I know is that it no longer is. I was never a part of that. And we come to this conversation as me only ever knowing it as this thing that was, or this thing that was dead. So I want to just kind of start and like extend the same question to you, and you can take it at any part in your history that you want. But like, what was the experience like ending Patient Sounds?
That's a super good question, and it's one that like I deal with people asking, especially the people who I had worked with through the tenure of the project. Like, they had a lot of questions about why I was stopping Patient Sounds, and so I sort of had to reckon with it a lot for myself in order to give them a decent answer, I think. Because I also felt sort of responsible to these artists whose work I'd been representing throughout the decade that I was doing it.
Yeah.
And so for me, Patient Sounds ending was about seeing a decade of work and seeing that as a really neat container for a project. And so I saw sort of like several ways that it could have gone. The first being that I could have let it fizzle out, or sort of like flush into obscurity after losing steam or getting burned out. Like, without any sort of like claim on primacy saying that Patient Sounds was like the first tape label, because it absolutely obviously wasn't. But like, Patient Sounds was a label that came into the limelight in however way that it, like the ways that it did, through the sort of like cassette boom,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched that sector change so much in the 10 years that I was working in it that I was sort of like, this has been really fun, but I kind of want to try something different. And I don't know if it would be true to the brand to like completely pivot Patient Sounds into a different medium. And so instead, I'm going to take this 10-year like catalog, which I also often called a canon. Like I took this 10-year canon of stuff that I worked with people and I put it in a container and was like, this is done. It was a blast. I'm going to try something different now. And so ending it was as much about a respect for the work that I had the privilege of sharing by other artists as it was about sort of like uh, honoring Patient Sounds as a project and trying to remain true to what that brand and that sort of like identity as a project was about from the beginning, which was this like renegade spirit and this trying to make our own rules to get tapes into the world for a while. So I ended it because it felt like it was the right thing to do for the project and also for myself. Yeah.
Oh, we don't have Jake.
Jake, we lost your audio.
Hello.
Yep.
Check.
There we go.
Cool. That it's really interesting in terms of like the real worldness of you ending Patient Sounds, because so many things, as you can see that date, because that was like the end of November or the end of 2019, excuse me,
Yeah,
right?
September-ish. Yeah.
Okay. Because you and I met officially in person for the first time and I have it over here, on the weekend, November 15th through the 17th. It was Sunday, so it was the 17th,
Art Book Fair.
at the Chicago Art Book Fair in downtown Chicago. And that was the last, was that the last table, Ling, you ever did with,
yeah, it was
with
the last
Patient Sound?
last event for Patient Sounds. Other than I think that Still Waiting show happened before that, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, but we did an event at the Hideout Inn here in Chicago, which is like a fantastic venue. And then after that Hideout show, I think we did Art Book Fair as our sort of like last hurrah. Yeah.
Totally.
And that was the first time that we met each other. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I felt too like I have like some prints over here. I wish I could pan this over. I'll show it maybe in the show notes or something. I don't know. Or we'll do an after hours for the Patreon. Anyway, that like it was so incredibly cool to watch someone who I knew and like very like in the distance become homies IRL, but then
Yeah.
also to watch someone go through that process of like, this is my meat and potatoes, and now I'm like, no more. And it's like, whoa, what am I getting to watch right as I meet you and watch you do this? And we'll get to what you go to next after that. But I think it was really helpful for me as an artist to watch someone do that. And as I've known you since that time, I've struggled a lot with things ending and things like moving on and like forming new worlds that are probably pretty close to our old worlds, but there's new rules involved or new limitations. How have you felt like since that time with like new rules and limitations in your life? Like, are you feeling very like, if I do something like that feels very Patient Sounds, like does that come up at all?
I mean, it's like ultimately going to inform every decision that I make with work that I'm making, both for like my new publishing venture and also for myself. But I think that I love rules, and there was like a really like sort of, I think Patient Sounds for me was a chance to sort of learn how to make rules for these kinds of projects, because I started it when I was very young. I was like 22 or something. And so to start this brand that would run for a decade and sort of like negotiate running a brand for a decade that eventually became like an on the books business, like that project demanded that I learn how to make rules and write a business plan and like do my taxes and all of this kind of stuff. And so I learned a lot about that early on, and also went from like stars in my eyes, I'm going to run a record label, to like dread on my face, I run a record label. It was like it's a 10-year long process, and I loved so much of it. And I learned a lot about rules. So that way, now that I'm in Cached doing that project, I have been very quick to say like, these are boundaries, these are rules. I also think like there's a huge tendency for people who are running cottage industries like record labels or publishing companies to sort of like see rules or contracts as a sort of disqualifier for being DIY. Like, oh, you run a small publisher, you present an artist with a contract. It's like, oh, is this like, oh, this is business. I think that there's like a recoil that happens with people with that a lot. And so I wrote up a series of rules for Cached, and I present them to artists that I'm collaborating with as a set of rules, but like board games require rules in order to function. And so I sort of paint it that way to them. Like, these are the rules for the game. I really want to play this game with you, and you get to play with me, and we're going to play this game together. And if we're going to do this, then like, here's a set of rules about how this is going to work, both like aesthetically and conceptually and financially. There's things that I have that are important to my brand, and I want you to know that before we start a single thing together, so you can sort of know how you're going to lean into the rules. And then also, I think rules are amazing because you know where you can lean in and bend and break rules, and or like bend in best cases, and then sometimes break in ultimate best cases. Like, if you know what the rules are and then you break it in a way that's really exciting to me as a collaborator, I can be like, damn, that was a good reason to break that rule. And then it sets a precedence for understanding that that's a possibility. But yeah, I think a lot of what happened with me closing Patient Sounds was realizing that I needed a little bit more rules to make it clear for everybody involved about how it was going to run.
So
myself included.
What I'm detecting in that is that giving yourself a clean break, or giving yourself a new opportunity to lay the ground rules kind of can help clean up the mess you made over the course of 10 years of like fuck it, let's just make something, and then that like that can fly for a long time, but it doesn't like really fly forever. And like the dirtiness that can come from just making things with other people and having you change over the course of that 10 years, something that you were okay with 5 years ago might not be you probably aren't okay with now. And it can be kind of difficult to manage that messiness that happens inside of organizations as time goes on. So it really feels like this was a way for you to kind of clean up that structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, when you have a brand like Patient Sounds, and it's obviously not like, a Hallmark legacy, whatever brand, like a million people don't know about it or whatever, but people do have a relationship with that brand.
Yeah.
And I think that I am accountable to them as the person who operates that brand, but they don't necessarily know that it's me that's accountable for that. It's just that Patient Sounds is this specific thing. And I knew that I wasn't really interested in offering that specific thing in the same way anymore. And I could go through the process of like a rebrand and then like explaining the rebrand and all this kind of stuff. But to me, what felt the most natural was to say, like, that project's done. And I think it gives the fan base and also the artists who are involved a kind of understanding of closure too, and to say like we all did this thing, we did it together, we're going to do something different, and like maybe some of y'all are going to be involved in whatever is next, but like let's just put this thing in a container and put it on a shelf and like appreciate that it's in a container on a shelf. And I think that kind of creative closure isn't afforded to a lot of people, both on the creator side and on the curatorial side. It's usually like, this thing ended because we ran out of money and the website is going to stay up forever and no one's going to update it anymore. And I did not really want to have that be how, because I put so much of myself into Patient Sounds, and I wanted to honor the work that I did as much as the work of the people who I collaborated with by saying, like, let's respect this brand and stop it. Which I think is like, yeah. Go ahead, Jake.
I'm so sorry.
It's a complicated thing too. I received a lot of backlash. I received backlash for stopping Patient Sounds too. Yeah, from people. Yeah, both friends and also like friends and collaborators and strangers. Oh, so yeah.
The stranger backlash is a different world, probably. In a lot of ways.
And like I was not expecting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, I think that working publicly as an artist and putting your work out there does kind of like necessitate those responses at some point, especially if you're doing well. Like that's best case scenario is is that you come up against these conflicts about perception and other people's partial ownership inside of an idea. And and that's fair. That's fair. That's what we're asking people to do. And I think that this touches on a lot of ideas also for the travel agency, and the reason why like we structure this the way that we structure it is because like we're trying to create fertile ground for collaborations that can exist and move through time, but also you have to build in these breaks. You have to build in these times to break away from the expectation, because like if your expectations change and others remain the same, then like it's a losing battle.
Yeah.
You can't continue to make something that no longer feels authentic, because then all you do is challenge the legacy of the work that you made.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I respect that, and we are not. It's not the same reason I bring this up. I don't plan on ending the travel agency in a month. We're not doing the Third Wave magazine thing here.
Here we go, everyone. It's been fun.
The break next week is going to last forever.
We are going to take a break next week.
We're taking a break next week.
Yeah.
I thought we were on a break. Okay.
I do have to bring up this next slide, and I know we could continue on that, but I think on the opposite side of reason, I do want to bring up this slide here, and begin to kind of discuss like this inside of this context of like growing things, nurturing things, but also like maintaining things. What did I do?
No, exactly. Growing and nurturing, literally and metaphorically.
Oh, am I being?
It was just
am I being lame?
No. It was never mind. I ruined it. Keep going.
Am I being cool?
No, you're doing great. No, I love it. No, it was a positive, but it was an inclusive one.
Okay, I don't want to make a joke of it, but it is
okay. It started as a joke, so that's fine.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Fine.
I'm happy. Yeah. I'm happy if it's a joke, but it is like it is like this opposite ridiculous thing. It's like this absurd thing that comes out of what we're talking about is like kind of a similar approach to cultivating communities, and I think that like birds, bugs, or fish is a question that we discussed. That Matt brought to us off stream that we should discuss at some other time. But like
that's Lynette's question though. That's my wife's question, just for the record.
Give Lynette props.
That's her material. So
give Lynette props.
We should get people in the chat on that. Which team are you? Birds, bugs, or seep specifically?
Yeah. That'll take us down a whole rabbit hole. But this one is specifically about bugs.
Well, just throw it in the chat. Just get that going. We don't even have to address it. Just it's there.
And I know that this created a really strong sense of community between you and Jake. This unmown patch is like the first thing that Jake brought up to me about you, and this is like what Jake led with was this work.
I'm so fascinated by the response to this thing. I don't know why it was so. Should I like give the backstory for the work first?
I think Jake should.
Okay.
Well, Matt, you're never gonna have to jump in on this, but I feel like it was like it's just okay. Without like no one like without
Jake,
me
take
being
us
able
on a
to
journey.
When I saw this piece, it was also equally like the most me thing, not to make it about me, but like something as so simple and beautiful as just like I'm just gonna mow a strip of land and leave it. There is just like it's everything I want out of a piece of art, frankly, because it took like no time at all. It was simple, but it was also like devastatingly fun, but also like beautiful.
It also took forever.
So that's what I got out of it and why it meant so much to me. But I do think people should hear like the story behind it, because it is such a wonderful story, I think. But
okay, so I paint it as like a land art gag is how I started to like explain it to people, because I love land art and installation pieces like that. But obviously we don't all have the resources to like go and move a mountain or whatever, create spiral jetty. And so I was mowing my lawn, which my dad was a horticulturalist and a landscaper and a landscape architect.
Wow.
So mowing the lawn has like a very sacred patriarchal space in my brain and my life and my heart. And so I was mowing the lawn, which is a thing that I had to do as a kid, and he was very particular about how the lawn was mowed. And I was mowing my lawn here in Chicago, and my mower ran out of gasoline. And it ran out of gasoline while I was in the middle of doing this sort of like spiral pattern in the yard that I do. And there was just this rectangle in the middle. And I was so charmed by this rectangle and was like, oh, this is fun. And then I went and got Lynette and I was like, look at this thing. And she was like, huh, that's fun. And I was like, I think I'm going to leave it. And she was like, cool. So then I sort of like, I retconned it. And so I sort of like sat on a chair in my backyard and looked at it for a while and just thought about what it could mean, like its potentials, and didn't necessarily go in with that conceptual thinking about I was going to do this land art gag. I like my mower ran out of gas, and then I sort of had to sit down and make sense of what I saw and why it was so charming to me. Mm-hmm. And then I had all of this stuff that came up as I was sitting there looking at it and was like, this piece has legs. It's hilarious. I'm going to just like not mow this patch of grass in my yard all summer and see what happens. And so that's where it came from. And then in the process, I learned that it was as much about documentation as it was about execution. It was also this idea of like patience, like letting a thing expand over time, define itself over time. It was so fun. I don't know. That's sort of the story. I also see it as like a direct affront to like Eurocentric patriarchal landscape culture and like monoculture grass. And there's definitely like an ecological, like tongue-in-cheek thing happening with it.
Yeah.
Especially with the outcome, which I couldn't have planned this any better, but it was like overrun by an invasive species. And so it killed my yard. Like in theory, leaving this piece of grass unmowed should have helped reestablish habitat. But instead, this like creeping Charlie that you see in most of the pictures is an invasive species, and it killed all of the grass in my yard. And so I think that there's like a lot happened in this like 5x12 patch of grass. My dogs also shit in it a lot.
You risked it all for the art, for the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so many things. And Rick, please interrupt me and jump in.
No, this is your moment.
Also, I want to say that Jake did a performance, if you will, of Unmown Strip, even though it wasn't as long. But you did do a performance of Unmown Strip, and I was so tickled by that. It like really, it made me see that this piece was more than maybe just a gag in a way that was really nice. Yeah.
That's, I mean, like, and that's exactly it. Like, that is the beauty to me of like, I can do it too. And the only, like, I feel like the only like limitation is to properly cite who did it. That's what I would want, is just to like add to a legacy of people doing it. And it would lose all value if I like didn't tag you. It's like dumb as that sounds, but like, because I want people to understand and see where this came from. And literally, what was so interesting too. So this is
Rick just talk about your piece.
To talk about my, version of it is I did it in the front yard, which added a whole new social context to it because when I left it, I had neighbors that were around that like weren't talking to me, but I definitely felt the weight of them being like,
it makes people, it's a polarizing piece of work in a way that you would never think.
You would never think. It's but,
God, the mohawk. I mean, the mohawk is like a classic, like counterculture hairstyle.
Yep.
Right. Well, and so just for the sake of understanding the situation for me, I did this. I got my camera out. I took 2 or 3 pictures and then I mowed it immediately. Because also some part of me was like, well, like my mom, this is my mom's house in St. Louis. She was trying to sell her home, which is now sold. But like, I was like, I need to, like, this isn't my place. But like to just even document it, I felt a really hard time, like trying to find the right angle to get it. So I think like from that space of like, okay, how can I share this very like in-person thing that you can enjoy that is completely seismically different as a vibe in person, but then to document it in a way that like gets the joy across. I ended up taking a lot of like iPhone pictures to like try to like test it before I took a film picture of it. So this was I think I should have 2 on that post, but that was the one that I felt like actually told, and also like time of day, which
Yeah,
plays
it's
with like
huge.
shadow.
It's actually more about the shadow than it is about the height of the grass. Like capturing or documenting the work is more about, it's like a presence and absence thing, which I think is really interesting.
It was hard. It was really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just, I mean, it's just one of those things where I feel like it hit perfect, like 100% threshold of what an art piece could be.
That
And then,
means that
which
means
is
so
like,
much.
that's the impossible goal. Like we're always like floating at like 99 or something. Like this is like it's not a home run, it's a grand slam. That's what it is.
Thank you so much,
I
Jake.
love it so much.
That really does mean a ton to me because it really was. I think that's like, this also goes so much into my music practice too. It's like, I tried for a long time to try to make work that was conceptual or like heady, or like I went into stuff thinking a lot about it. And I felt like that was the work that kept fizzling for me with both myself and my, like, an audience. I was like, put all this thought into something and share it with someone and have to explain why it was interesting. And then I stopped trying to do that and I started having fun more in my, like, my art studio and my personal art practice. And in that, like, having fun and not really trying to think too much about a piece of work, that's where I was finding work that was sparking joy, Marie Kondo, whatever. But like bringing an audience joy, and then also bringing myself joy. Like the work that I was thinking less about, I was feeling more pleasure with. And so then, like, seeing that also was happening with audiences, is I was like, oh, that seems to be really interesting. Maybe I can love conceptual art because there's so much conceptual art that I find really interesting and fascinating. But maybe that's not the mode that I should work in, which was also a sort of like, there's a sort of ownership in making art that you sort of have to learn. Maybe the work that you're maybe not better or worse at, but the work that you seem to find the most fulfilling. And I think I find work most fulfilling when I'm playing. I have to play in order to make the work that I love to do. And I love to, like, do studio visits with my friends who are making really conceptual work and talk to them about all of that. But I am definitely a retcon person, like retroactive concept. Like I make something and then I get to sit with it and think about why I had fun doing that thing. And then I sort of give way to impulse in those spaces. And then impulse seems to clear up some space. It's like a runway. Like I can land on that impulse and then I can turn around and say, like, okay, where am I? And figure it out.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and it makes sense that and natural that a lot of, like, for instance, I feel like your audio or music based work is like improvisation a lot. So that like where does that go in a space outside of the sonic realm, that like the play of like the fucking mower ran out of gas, like
the string broke. Yeah.
The string broke on the guitar. What do I do now? The drummer exploded. Okay, what do we do now? Like that's a little rock joke there. But yeah,
RIP for the drummer.
But yeah,
F's
I
in the
think
chat
like
for the drummer.
But anyway, continue. I think that it clearly is prevalent in your life, and I think speaks to the type of artist that you are. Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to jump in on that, and it's community-based practice. I think that is what is revealed by that type of feedback loop that you're creating. Is this community? I mean, on in certain ways like the retcon, but that comes from a sense of realization and a sense of sharing, and then a sense of like cause and effect, and pop. I think is a thing that I'm focused on a lot. Is like if Jake could remix that song and like put it out, remix that image and put it out, like, oh, what does that mean about the nature of the work? And you get into these places of like community is like so fundamental to your life and so fundamental to your practice.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also, I don't know. I don't have much to say. You nailed it. Yeah.
Great.
But I also think like music is such a strange thing in that it's so temporal. Mm-hmm. Like you can make an unmown strip and it's static, but it also is always growing. But like part of the work is taking a picture, Mm-hmm. and then the documentation of it is the thing that stays forever. Or like a painting is static. Like you make a painting, obviously it's going to age over however long, and it's going to look different under different light during different times of the day, but that image doesn't essentially change. But like with music, and also you can look at a painting for a second or look at a painting for 20 hours straight as a sort of like, as an experiment. But with music, you make a song, someone has to sit down, or they don't have to, and that's part of the requirement. Like it's a temporal experience. Like it requires an audience to sit through 3.5 minutes of something, whether the audience is the person who's making it, working in the studio, obsessing over like a single cut, or playing it to a party of people who aren't even really listening to the music, or to someone who's like obsessively, detail-orientedly listening to your music on the train on their commute, and it's like a part of their day. Like music requires time in a way that so many other, like more traditional art practices maybe don't. And so that's one of the things I think is like, I am trying with my music practice, and I think this rubs off into all of my other art practices too, to find a way to be hospitable in that space. Like if you're going to ask someone to spend 4 minutes of time with something that you've made, I think that there's this like 4 minutes doesn't seem like a long time, but it also can be a really long time. And so I think that making work accessible or hospitable is really important to me. And so I think that there are, and that's community oriented, I think, like in what Rick was saying. Like I'm interested in making sure that people feel invited into what I'm doing in a way that's also like maybe you don't necessarily have to understand the mechanics of why I made what I made, but I want you to find like a little something exciting in what I'm making before, as you spend this 3 or 4 minutes with me, whether it's a song or a photograph or whatever. I think that hospitality is really important to me. And like a lot of my favorite artists aren't necessarily hospitable makers, and I think that that's fine too. But I strive to do that in my work.
I feel like that's so interesting on the idea of like hospitable makers, because I feel like there's a lot of folks that somehow, despite like being in a cabin somewhere and making their music or their art, and then they send it out in the world, and then they're just like, they say like, F off to the rest of the world. They just kind of do their thing. And then it like explodes, like, because people find their work incredible, whatever. But then there's people who like, I think, turn their canon towards the world, and they're like, I'm making this in tandem with you, whether you know it or not, because I know that your experience is what I'm considering as well. Like it's a very like I just feel like even like you and the grass is like, that was a duo. Matt Sage Grass duo. Like you cared for it as much as like itself, almost as an audience member, as much as the thing itself. Because I feel like I look at what I do a lot as like, I'm not, look at me, here's my work, I send it to the world. I almost feel like I don't even know how I freaking did this. So I always feel like constantly in the audience of my own work. And I feel like having that space, like there are just some artists who can be like, yeah, I wrote like 20 songs and I have a new album out. And it's my album, I wrote this. I'm like, I somehow made this happen. I don't know where this came from, but it did. But I think that the communal like space of canon, like how you view the audience, how you view community, I think is incredibly important, and I think it shows through your work. Absolutely.
And this is like, I'm going to circle back really fast. This was a huge thing that I wanted to separate Patient Sounds from Cached with, because Patient Sounds we did this thing called Open Window every year, where I had an email inbox, and for a month, I accepted demos from anybody and everybody, audio demos of albums. And then I would go through, and it would take me about 4 months to listen to every single demo. And I would listen to every second of every demo. So I would get between 100 and 200 albums on average every year. And then I would try to pick like between 5 and 10 of those albums to put out on cassette. And so Patient Sounds was always this like, it was a project in curation where I was receiving music from strangers and then pairing that with music from friends or collaborators that I knew and putting them out next to each other, because I thought it produced a sort of like interesting, like, look at this thing that this person who I've never met, who lives in, I don't know, wherever, like South America. Yeah, Omaha sent me. And like this person from Omaha that sent me this thing is making something that's also weirdly akin to this thing that a friend of mine who's living in LA made. And then I'd like to put them out together. And I realized, first of all, what a daunting task I'd set myself up with, like listen all of that music every year, which was like delightful, but also exhausting. But I also realized the more I sort of like quantified what I was receiving and like zoomed out and saw a picture of what I was receiving from these demos, 90% of the work I was getting was solo work. So it was like mostly people working alone. And a lot of them would come with like a paragraph that a person would write that was like, I've been working on this music in my bedroom for 3 years. And I think that it's an amazing thing that I've made and I want you to put it out. And like the trust that they showed in me to send me that thing that they've spent so much time with, that they've lived with, is immense. And the amount of times that I had to say no to work like that because it didn't fit into my curatorial vision was also like exhausting. Ultimately, I became sort of exhausted of having to be that person who was saying no to this work that was so important to these people. And I also became tired of work that was so singular. So like, I'm the artist here. This is my thing that I made in my room alone. I didn't make it for Patient Sounds, but like, you have this open call, so I'm going to send it to you. I got really tired of sort of like figuring out how to negotiate all of that at once. And so Cached, the main, when I was like thinking about what I wanted to do as I continued publishing, because I don't know how to not publish stuff. Like it's just a part of how it's my mode.
Yeah.
It's my mode. And so I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And I came away from a sort of like mood board session knowing collaboration was the most important part. And so with Cached, we're never going to put out a release on CD that's musical by a solo artist. It's all going to be collaborative. So like, there's never going to be a release that's attributed to one artist on CD. And like, I'm working on some book projects now, and those book projects are sort of a collaboration, both aesthetically, conceptually, between myself and the book artist. So it's like this idea that we are working on this material together. It's material that's being created specifically for this outlet, with an understanding of what this outlet's sort of purpose is. And I think that that is as much for the artists and for myself as also for the audience for Cached, to sort of like know, like they're dealing, like this is a collaborative work, and you're maybe like, you're invited to be a part of this collaboration. Because I think there's so many labels who I love who I feel so removed from. Because like I adore them and their music is so important to me, but it's on a plinth, and it's like, that's that label, and I'll never have access to that thing. And that feels, it can be isolating, I think. And I don't want to make work like that. I also feel so seen now that Rick's putting that.
Well, I like,
and if you like that, then
Yeah.
I like what you say here. Where is it? Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Cached does not accept demo submissions, but is always looking for artists and collaborators.
Yep.
I think that really kind of like distills, and I'm not even really familiar with that kind of like terminology. I've never submitted a demo. I've been in bands and I've made music, but I've never like gone out for like what a demo submission is, but that seems like a form.
It's a culture.
Yeah. And I like that you just say, we don't do it, but like we do it. We do this other, we do this other thing. Jake's got something.
To me, like, it's hard to explain that I like what Matt said and what that statement says is just it, because I feel like it's almost like we view record labels as like major businesses, and it's like, you come in there, buy a product, and get out. It feels very like, or like, I sent a submission to Sub Pop. I hope that they like me, and then eventually they're like, yes, we like you, as the kings of indie world, indie pop. We say yes. Whereas like, I think the future, but even small tape labels to some degree, is like, I send you this, and then they go, okay, and it's just like, I feel like there's almost more of like this passive acceptance that happens with Cached that I think is the future of this, of like the where the release begins and the label begins, and like those two worlds are mixed. But then also it's like, we have all these spaces to create and to share. So like, being on Discord, being on Twitch, being on these other platforms that are Intermedia, which we'll let Matt go off on that.
Yeah.
I love that. It just, there's like, just, if nothing else, just a vibe. Like, it can be as simple as just a vibe difference of like, I think that the future of this is this passive space where it's like, we are a vessel with you to show you, and as you come in, we move with you. It's like it's frankly very watery, which again speaks to always, but
Definitely why we made these sweatshirts for sure.
Yeah,
yes.
I think
which I had up. Yeah, this is
uh,
the water cycle.
yeah. The thing too for me is like, as a person who academically is interested in the history of media publishing, but more specifically music publishing, um, record labels are still following the model that was set as precedents by major labels that were established in the 50s, who were like making records as subsidiary to sell not just records but also products like
Yeah.
like uh the payola system and the music industry system are built on consumership. And I think in so many ways, even like the coolest indie rock labels are still following that same model, even though they're trying to sort of like preach a sort of like alternative independence kind of thing. Like they're still following the model that Columbia RCA set up.
Right.
It's just a matter of scale for them. And for me, I don't think what I'm doing is like singular or whatever. It's like not its own thing that is only Cash is doing it. But I am just really tired of that model, both as a listener and a fan of music. I think it's mostly as a fan too. Like I want to make the label that I would be a fan of, and I'm most interested in not that.
Yeah.
Like not the Columbia system, not the payola system. I'm really interested in something like Lynette. My wife is an artist and a brand manager, and she has this amazing talk about brand, and I have to credit her about it because it's so spectacular. But she talks about how brand is sort of like, it's more than just a logo. It's like your relationship to a company. It's how a company feels to you, not just as a consumer, but also as a human being. Like there's an emotional, like we just talked about how we have an emotional relationship to Dr. Pepper. Like, and so I think that like, when you operate what is essentially a brand, I think you're responsible not just for a good logo or like a website that is easy to navigate, but also for that like social and parasocial relationship that you have with your audience. Like you are a part of their life. When they order something from you, they want it to feel special, and I want them to feel that special feeling. And I have ordered so many things from so many of my favorite record labels and have not received even a single sticker in a box, and it's sort of disappointing to like get a package in the mail and it's just like the record and a cardboard slat to make sure that it's safe and it's sealed up and there's nothing special about it. Like that makes me feel like a consumer and not a receiver of art. And I think that only degrades the art objects that are in those packages. And so I'm really interested in trying to elevate the experience, both for the person who's receiving the object in the mail, whether it's like sending them extra things in an envelope or just making the envelope look cool, I think is like exciting and fun. But then also for the people who are making work underneath that umbrella to know that their work is going to be sent with that kind of care. I think that like also is important to them. And having worked with like a lot of different record labels, it makes me happy to know when a label is doing that kind of thing, or like spending that extra time thinking about packaging, or like thinking about how it's going to go out to an audience. It makes my work feel less disposable and more important, because there's so much music made every day, and music can, as a musician, can feel so disposable to make something and have it just like go out into the effluvia of the musical universe and just get lost in the bubbles. Like you don't see everything that everybody makes. And so to know that you can add that little extra character or like personality or hospitality to it is at the heart of why I do what I try to do, for sure.
Well, let's get some snaps for that. And I mean, yes, right on. And you're doing that. You're doing that, and I think that what we are going to probably be getting into in the next segment is how the decentralization of media and like what live can do for the storm of consumers, and and what tangible objects can do for real objects for real people can
Yeah.
can really do some different things. I actually
Damn, that's good. Real objects for real people. It's like a
Trademark, trademark,
beautiful.
trademark.
You should put that on T-shirts, please.
yeah, you can have it if you want. I think
No,
you
no, 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 no. That's yours. It's
All right,
good.
I'll take it. I got it.
I'd,
Fine
I'd
now.
buy that travel agency T-shirt.
yeah. Okay. Well, we'll rock it. You have an object that's dropping soon. I just got notification that our new object dropped, and we haven't announced it yet. But I think that, or it's shipped. So, but there's this other idea that I kind of want to leave us with over the break is this idea of like inconvenience and purchasable inconvenience. I went onto your website last night onto the Bandcamp, and I bought your most recent album because first of all, like, I have to lead the way, and say like, go out and go buy this shit. I'm gonna put Matt links in the chat. Like, I did it. That was the first music I bought, the first digital music I have bought in. It has to be like 5 years. I don't remember the last time I bought physical music. And then
Whoa.
I was trying to think about how I would buy a CD and how, because I actually really love CDs. And
Oh, they're beautiful.
the CD is sold out, but like there are other CDs, and I have like home pods in my house. So I was trying to figure out how I would even play music from a CD, and then that's when shit starts to get beautiful. So like I could have my old MacBook hooked up to like an external CD drive, and I could put the CD in the external CD drive and AirPlay the music from the CD to the home pod. And like,
Yeah.
what if I just had like a stack of CDs and just like a stable MacBook with like a beautiful stainless steel CD drive, and that's where I put the CD in. And
Yeah.
and it's going over the air, which I think creates issues for sound quality. But we can get into that later. But like the inconvenience, like selling the beauty of that inconvenience is something that I think is definitely important to invest in and to reapproach in our lives. That just using consumerism for convenience-based models of consumerism, like, is inherently kind of empty and detaches us from the process. But
Yeah.
like exploring ideas about like, how do I make a purchase really inconvenient on myself? And then you start to get into the dust of art.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
dust for sure.
I mean, I did this for 10 years when I was selling cassette tapes during the digital boom. And I spent literally a decade of my life where every time I set up a merch table, someone was like, are these cassette tapes? It's like, yeah, dude. Every time I set up a merch booth, I had like a thing that I got used to where I was like, there's download codes inside the J card. Like, it was just part of like how I operated as a business person, was like I had to explain the inconvenience of my product to people.
Mm-hmm.
And then I pivoted to the CD because we got a car with a CD player. And I was like really into listening to CDs in the car, even though I could just as easily Spotify stream like almost anything that I would be playing in the car. It has,
I miss it.
Yeah, there's a weird nostalgia to it. It's also a very high quality listening experience, like digital CD. Also, I think that's really important to remember is like the CD is not popular in America, but like if you go to other countries, the CD is still the preferred consumption mode for music. It is incredibly convenient. Like when I was in Japan, they only wanted CDs while I was there. They were interested in vinyl, and like the cassette industry is also like it's happening there. People are making and selling cassette tapes, but the CD is the preferred mode here. So like there's a regional side to it too. I know we're supposed to go on break, but yeah,
it's a loose break. You will never take a break when we're having a good conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it is a good place for a break, because we are going to come back and get into probably more of this idea of intermedia study and intermedia objects, and I can see us going on with that, or we might come back and talk about something completely different. So I'm going to switch over to my screen here. Across the break, it's a good opportunity to consider the ways that you inconvenience yourself and the ways that feels good. I had this idea, and this is a store that I want to put together at some point, where I get a really small storefront somewhere in a highly dense urban area with like a subway nearby, and it's a store that only sells like Hario glass beakers and like different kinds of like uh, scientific beakers. Everything is glass, and it's like a really tight and narrow space. And every now and then the subway goes over the store, and everything jingles and rings together in harmony. And it's so tight that you really kind of have to slink through the aisles in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable. So you can keep an eye out for that. We're going to take a quick break. It's 12:03 right now, so we'll be back at 12:11. Okay, we're back. Hello. Hello, everyone. I hope you had a good break and considered the positive ways you can inconvenience yourself on a day-to-day basis. Walking instead of driving or biking instead of driving is a good one, especially as this weather it's starting to thaw out. The thing I love about living in the city is just seeing people like sitting on their porches again. Even when it's like kind of too cold to do that, but like when it's like 43, where in the fall nobody around here is sitting on their porch when it's 42, but in the spring everyone is like, "Oh man, it's 40s." Love that shit. Welcome back, y'all.
Hello.
You gonna have some snacks as we move through?
Yeah, I might casually snack.
Yeah, please do.
One of the perks of being a type 1 diabetic is that your life revolves around snacking constantly. And so my wife Lynette just brought me a plate full of delicious snacks. Just tested my blood sugar, doing really well. But yeah,
Good.
I have my snacks.
The stevia doesn't mess with that at all?
No, not at all. That's like one of the perks is that it like doesn't affect your blood sugar at all. But
because even aspartame can at some points, can't it? Or some people like it makes them kind of weird.
It does a thing where it makes your body think that it's consuming sugar, and so it administers or like releases insulin. But that doesn't affect me at all because I don't make any insulin.
Oh,
so.
okay.
Yeah,
so for the other type of diabetes, that can be a bigger problem.
Yeah, because then it can make you go hypoglycemic, which is like low blood sugar.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
and we have a big audience of people who complain that we never eat brunch on
It's true.
cam. So you leading the snack wave in the third hour, which maybe we're onto something with that.
Yeah. Well, apple and sharp cheese, y'all.
Oh, and then killing the game too. Okay, right. Just out the gate, we're going cheese and
Just wait
cheese
for the
and
pretzel goldfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
The third act of Travel Agency brought to you by Pepperidge Farms. Pepper Goldfish.
Goldfish is
That
made by
is-
Pepperidge Farms?
Yeah.
I never put that together.
Neither do I.
You know, it's weird how it's hiding right in plain on the
Oh,
front.
there it is.
Yeah, Goldfish is such a modern brand. I mean, like
Yeah.
they got the swirls and the gradients and the fish coming out hot from the 90s.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then you have like an old
Not
mill,
changing a damn thing.
Old
Yeah.
Mill Road. I used to live on
One of
Creve Coeur Mill Road. We had a barn.
Can we just talk about how goldfish are one of the best snack crackers there is, though? Is that is that controversial?
No, I still don't know where I stand on the whole goldfish versus Cheez-It world.
Oh,
I think
goldfish, absolutely.
I don't know.
I'm a
Cheez-Its are so salty.
I mean, that's why it's so
Yeah.
good, though. But pretzel
Pretzel goldfish are
Goldfish.
so good. Yeah.
sounds crazy, but is it even a goldfish anymore?
I mean, it's shaped like a
It
fish.
is, yeah.
I mean, it do be looking like one.
Yeah. Comes out of that white bag.
It's still tasty, so I mean, who am I to say?
I like
Yeah.
Ritz myself.
Oh, the dark night of the.
Ritz are good in that like brown plastic bag that they come in. I love that.
They're
shit.
so buttery.
Yeah.
Oh, they're delicious.
Do they actually
Yeah.
contain butter? That's something I'll need to know.
I don't know.
Honestly,
They do.
Maybe.
They are very buttery.
Very
Uh,
buttery.
50-50.
Regardless, if we don't get going, we might not ever start. I think
I love food, so this is dangerous.
Art Brunch, a show that is equal parts art, equal parts brunch.
It really is. Yeah.
I miss brunch. I really, really actually miss it. I
Just
wanna-
restaurants.
Hey,
Ugh.
it took me a year to miss going out, and now I'm fully in the throes of missing it. I think up
Yeah.
until this point, I could have taken it or leaving it. But now I'm starting to feel like, oh, I would really love to go to Southwest Diner. I think
Yeah.
that's just kind of what I want to do.
Yep.
We'll get
I
there.
can't talk anymore about it because I'll start crying. So yeah.
I'm very emotional about missing restaurants. I worked in the food service industry for like 10 years too, so it's like my second home is in a restaurant, and man, do I just miss it. Oh,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I hear that full time,
oh.
full scale.
Some transition to some built bridge to the differences between sharing experiences in person and how we can create shared experiences across digital spaces.
Perfect.
Huh.
There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
seamless,
You did it.
seamless.
that's why we drink the same drink. I
Yeah.
think that like even if canned crucible changes as we know it, that it's such an inconvenient bit. It's like the most inconvenient thing that we do is like getting people to get the same beverage across states, and like you all are. Jake was able to drop it off, but then sometimes we have people from out of this state or out of the country that then we have to be like, well, do they sell this there? And it's like that's the way that we can inconvenience. My cat loves this paper bag right now. Inconvenience ourselves the most.